Good evening. Welcome to DES244 package design for Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. This is the week 2 live session 2. And of course, I'm your instructor, David Place, and we'll go through the initial introductions again for this live session recording, and then we'll get to it. Okay, so just to touch on a couple of things that we mentioned yesterday or we went over last night. Looks are crucial to packaging design. So we want to make sure that our stuff fits the audience that we're trying to sell, and that we aren't skipping on the bells and whistles in our designs, that we are using all of the techniques available to us as graphic designers to cater to our market base and draw a consumer towards the package. So this can be a variety of techniques. It really depends on the product that you're trying to sell, but your goal is to have a very pretty or very attractive design that is going to get people to come and take a look at it, pick it up, and hopefully purchase it. Before you do anything, the first part of the design process is sketching your ideas. So we want to make sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves and that we are starting off with the basics, getting a good blueprint, a good mental map as far as what we want to do for the package design. The sketching has multiple reasons why we do it: to plan our design, to get the brainstorming process going, to help us save time in the long run. So these are all things we talked about in the live session 1 for week 2. And we skipped over the anatomy of the die line. So I'm going to cover that in just a couple minutes here once I go over the agenda and everything else. But I'm going to go back to the die line because I just glossed over it quickly. In fact, I didn't even really cover it at all last night, and it was on the slides, so I'm going to make sure that I cover that for you today. Okay, and then packaging design challenges. You know, what kind of things, there's always a design challenge. A lot of times we have to think about space in design, right? So fitting everything, sometimes text is too small and we can't have it so small that the consumer can't read the text, but we have to make things fit with what we're working with, right? So that sometimes is a big challenge, is space. Other things is colors. You know, you might want to use very bright neon colors, but they don't print well. And so that requires specialty inks and different types of physical concerns that go beyond what you're doing is the front end designer, the person working on the computer. So there's a lot to it, right? So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about some basic shape tools in Adobe Illustrator. Now, if you're working with Adobe InDesign, the drawing tools are very similar. So in fact, the drawing tools in Illustrator are going to be identical to the drawing tools that are available in InDesign. The only thing is the drawing tools in InDesign are much more limited. So Illustrator, of course, is for illustration. That's the whole point of the program. And so the software has a ton of different things to help you draw. And InDesign is more for the layout. And so the tools are more limited. So if time permits, I may show you in both softwares, but I've got Illustrator fired up, and that's the one I'm going to work with today predominantly, unless we have a little bit of extra time. If we have some extra time, I'll open up InDesign and show you. Now, I'll show you something called the Shape Builder tool, some basic rules about using it, and we can talk about some rules of composition, rules for packaging design, and then we're going to try to get into the assignment for part 2. Excuse me, which is your rough layout. So I've gone in and looked over your discussion post The discussion post is very self-explanatory. I'll just pull it up really quickly, but it's not asking you to reinvent the wheel. So our discussion for week 2 is basically asking you to discuss the importance of sketching. Okay, so we're asking you to discuss the role of sketching in the creative design process, and we want to know how the sketching process will quicken and restrict the creative design process. I'm going to give you a hint. It's not going to restrict the creative design process. We're asking for your opinion on things, but you should not, just as your instructor, I'm going to tell you, you should not look at sketching as a negative thing. You might feel that it's going to slow you down and be a little reluctant to engage with it, but that's really not helping you out, right? So we want to come at this with the right direction and attack this with a positive view of sketching and how it can help us, not a negative view, okay? And how can visual exploration of ideas on paper help you solve design challenges and communicate your design concepts simply and efficiently? Okay? So that, excuse me, I'm kind of feeling ill. Last night I was having a hard time, and tonight I'm not feeling too hot either. So if you hear me coughing and wheezing here, just bear with me. But the second part of that question, or that second bulleted point, is really the big one, okay? Because that's what we want you thinking about, is how putting your ideas down on paper and exploring them is going to help you solve problems and help you express your ideas to someone else. Now, that someone else could be someone in the same design team. It could be someone that's a client. But part of the sketch is to communicate that and get what's in your head in a visual space where someone else can see it. And so we have to just keep that in mind. So that's really the importance of the bigger importance, I think, of your discussion post is this second area here. So I would recommend you kind of concentrate on that. Okay. Now, going forward, our assessment this week is going to be a graded quiz. So as long as you're watching your videos and doing your readings, you should be set to go for the quiz. And as far as the assignment goes, we'll get into that after I get through the slides. Okay, so to begin with, we can look at some basic shape tools inside of Adobe Illustrator. Like I said, these things will carry over into InDesign as well. So if I open up Illustrator, I'm going to recommend that we work with the same workspace if you're following along while you're watching this. And so if your workspace looks different from mine, we can get these set up on the same page pretty quickly. When you open up Adobe Illustrator, you can change the workspace at the top. So what you should do is choose Essentials, or just choose Reset Essentials, and that will put you back at the default workspace. Now, what I like to do with this is sometimes I'll grab my toolbar and move it out. I might grab this and bring it over here so it's a little bit easier for me to see. And if you hit this double arrow, you can double stack the toolbar. Sometimes I like that because I don't have to look so deep in the page to find my tools. Now, sometimes your tools, you might not have all the tools together, but when you reset the essentials, that should put everything back so we have all the same stuff to look at. For some reason, if you're missing a tool, you can click on this, the ellipsis, the 3 dots, and go to Edit Toolbar. And whatever you have that is in white and not grayed out is something that you have not added to your toolbar. So if I, for instance, I like to have all of these pen tool options available. So if I want to add those to my toolbar, all I have to do is just grab them and drag them. And if I lay them on top of a tool, it will group them with that tool. So now I have what we call nested tools, and they're all right there. So you can do that with as many as you want. Now, Illustrator's doing this because they want the workspace to be a little bit less. Adobe wants this Illustrator workspace to be less intimidating. So Adobe Illustrator has a ton of tools available inside of it. And sometimes there are so many tools on the toolbar, it can freak people out when they're not used to them. So a new user can be pretty quickly intimidated by this workspace. And so Adobe's trying to streamline the process and make things look a bit simpler for people that are just learning. And so they've grouped kind of what they think are essential tools here on the toolbar. And then they give you the option to edit the toolbar as you see fit. But we're going to talk about some basic shape tools to begin with. So on the toolbar here, if you look down, you'll see a square. And whenever you see this little triangle, that's telling you that there are nested tools, meaning if you click and hold that, other tools will appear. So of course, a rectangle tool, let me get some color here so we can have a little bit more of a recognizable example. Okay. Now, I just opened up my colors. But if you look at this, this is your fill color and this is your stroke color. So this is the color to the inside of the shape. This is the color on the outside border of the shape. So if you hold down and drag, this will drag a rectangle shape. If you want this to be a perfect square, you hold down the shift key and that will constrain the proportions to be a square. Now, I'm sorry, I hit an extra button there. So now if you deselect it, you have a square. I've got a red square. If you look closely, there is a thin black line. And so that's the stroke right here. So if you want this stroke to be bigger or smaller, you can click on that and you can go to the properties of the shape. So the properties inspector, or the properties panel, it's the properties panel now, but I call it the properties inspector because I have a lot of experience working with Adobe Animate, formerly Adobe Flash, and it was referred to as the properties inspector there forever. So the properties panel has been a feature of most, if not all, of the Adobe Creative Suite software for a very long time. But there were few applications in the Adobe Suite that pushed it and tried to get you to use it. And Adobe Animate, formerly Flash, was one of them that, you know, it would queue up right from the beginning that you could see it. And you're encouraged to use it all the time when you were working with software. So the properties inspector makes things a lot, or the properties panel makes things a lot easier for you to navigate and work with. So, for instance, if you're creating anything and you want to change a property to it, you would have to find the tool. So if I was using a type tool and I put some text in here, well, if I wanted to change that text without the properties panel, I would have to go up into my type menu and do a bunch of stuff to get different controls to become available. But using the properties panel, whatever you have on the artboard, even the artboard itself, when you click on it, you can see the specific properties of it. And then you can change those properties. So just by clicking on the artboard, I can see the properties of the artboard over here and I can change them. If I click on the shape, I can see the properties of the shape. And so I can see the width and the height. I can see the X and Y coordinates on my artboard. I can change the fill color. So if I say, you know what, I really want this to be purple tonight, I can change that to purple. And in a long roundabout way, I can change my stroke. Or I can just come in here and do it like so. Okay, so that's how we can manipulate that a little bit. Underneath the rectangle tool, you have an ellipse tool. If you just drag the ellipse, you can get an oval, so you can get your Easter egg shape, or you can try to make a circle, and when you get a perfect circle, you get that crosshair that lines up. But if you want to make sure that it's a perfect circle to begin with, you can just hold the shift key and drag it out, and you'll get a perfect circle. Underneath that ellipse tool, we have a polygon tool. Your polygon tool is going to give you multiple sided shapes. So here is a really, really good trick to work with this, because a lot of times people say, well, how do I change? It starts off, I think, with a pentagon as your default. So, oh, you know, how am I going to change that? There's a really easy way to change how many sides you have on the polygon. So polygon is a multi-side, right? That's basically what is a multi-sided shape. So your most simple polygon is going to be a triangle. And so you see here, if I drag it, I have a triangle. Well, if I want to make more sides on this polygon up here, let me just make it further down here. Okay. Go to your up arrows on your keyboard. And every time I hit the up arrow, I can add a side until I can almost get it almost to a circle, right? And if I hit the down arrows, I delete a side. So I've got a triangle, I've got a square, I've got a pentagon, I've got a hexagon, septagon, and octagon, right? Nonagon, decagon. Okay? Really easy. So the up and down arrows are going to help you control that. So that's a very, very easy thing to do, very cool thing to do, kind of fun to work with. Your star tool, same thing happens. You draw it out. You've got kind of, you know, this Christmas cookie star here. And if you want to make different stars, you know, you can just add using the up arrows, delete using the down arrows. And then you have a line tool that'll let you draw out lines, and the lines don't have a fill color, it draws with a stroke, so that's why those are black. So that's a little bit of basics about using some shapes here, and we'll work more with this stuff in a second. Okay. So let's talk about the shape builder tool. Now, the shape builder tool is something that is very useful, but you really got to play with it a little bit to see how it works and get comfortable. But sometimes you have to make complex shapes inside of Illustrator. So let me show you a couple things you can do with the shape builder tool. Going back to my Illustrator layout, it's not really a layout, but let's get rid of a couple of these things. Get rid of those lines, I don't need them. And let's take this one and this one. Whenever that happens and you double click and you see like one thing and everything else is grayed out, that means you're like inside that shape. And so we really don't want to do that right now, so I just backed off out of it. But what I want to do is put these together like this. Okay. And this is our shape builder tool. So if we grab our shape builder, okay, we can go over here where it says tool options. Okay. And we can change different properties of the tool to select gaps and so on. But what I want to do is grab the shape builder tool. Let's see. I like these shapes. And if I draw a line between them, I can merge them. So now I have this weird kind of custom shape. And if I wanted to add something else to it, I could take this guy over here And I can drag this over here to the side. And then again, we want to highlight everything. And then I can get this tool again, and I can drag over here, and I can merge them. Okay, so that's one of the things we can do with the tool. And again, we can take this over here, and we can get this kind of arranged like so. Let's see. I'm just looking for something really quickly. Highlight that. And you see how it picks up the color off of the first shape. So if I would have turned around and highlighted the purple first, then theoretically it should have picked up the purple from the shape. So the shape builder is a cool way to make complex shapes. And it's kind of fun to work with, but you've really, like I said, you got to practice with it a little bit. So it takes a minute to get used to it, and not something you want to just jump into and start, trying to rely on it right away. But, it's kind of fun, and I recommend that you do get to work with it a little bit more, and you can make some fun things pretty fast. Okay. All right, so rules of composition. We need a strong focal point, okay? So a key element to any good composition is going to be a strong focal point, and it's got to help your viewer's eyes naturally settle on the important pieces. Design first. So how do you tell what the focal point is in the design? So let me Google something real quick here. Okay, so I may actually, hang on a second, I may not have to rely on Google because I have some stuff here. I think I do. No, sorry, I don't have it on me right now. I left my flash drive attached to my other computer. So let's do this. Let's just look at some car magazines. They're usually pretty safe. Okay, let's get some images. And let's grab, well, that's a little too obvious. Let's look at this one. Or maybe not. Let's see. Open image, new tab. Okay, so one of the ways you can tell what the focal point is in the design is to close your eyes. Just kind of close them until everything clears out of your head for a minute, and then look at the design, open it up, looking at the design, and see where your eye goes to first. So when you find that, that's the focal point. So my eye went straight to the GT500 Cobra there, and bam, that's what it locked in and I focused on. So that's arguably the focal point of the design. Now, that's a huge thing. You got to know where you're drawing the user's attention. So how do you make something the focal point? Well, the focal point, most of the time, is going to be colorful. It should have some type of bright color usually associated. It doesn't have to be bright color. You can use dark color if you have enough contrast in the background. But it usually is brightly colored. It's usually pretty big, and it has some type of dynamic interest that draws you to it, makes you look at it. So that dynamic interest can be a number of things. It can be the subject matter. In this case, if you're going to read Car and Driver, you're probably pretty interested in looking at the car. And so you can see that, bang, there's a really nice looking car, and it gets your attention because it's bright orange. It's slanted a little bit to make it look like it's fast, it's dynamic, it gives you the impression that it's in motion. And so all those things contribute to that being the focal point in the design. Some other things going on here is repetition. So if we go back to those craft principles that you learned early on, I think in DES244-Week, of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Well, we've got repetition happening here with the black and the orange. So those colors are drawn from the car, and they basically line everything up. So we have this repetitive black, orange, black, orange, black, orange in the design. Another thing that happens here that's part of the composition is that we have something called rhythm, which is the repetition. And then we have similarity, meaning that the colors that are similar belong to each other. So by drawing colors from the car and then putting the text about the story in the car in the same color, then that makes our mind associate the color with the focal point of the car. In that case, in that scenario. Okay, so a strong focal point. So a key element to any good composition is a strong focal point. So we've got to make sure that we've got something that's going to grab our attention and get us to look at it. If it's packaging design, which is what this class is about, it's going to be something that sells your package, that sells your design. So it usually is going to demonstrate the product or show somebody enjoying the product. So I'm going to give you some different scenarios as we go through the course, just to kind of get your imagination going about things. But when you go, let's say if you have animals, you go to PetSmart. I say, oh, I'm going to go buy another dog leash for my dog, or I need to go buy a bed for my dog. Well, if I go to buy a new pillow bed for my dog, then there's usually a picture on a tag or somewhere of a dog laying in the bed, right? So it looks like, you know, the animal's enjoying the bed, it's laying down and everything's fine. And so that's the thing, you're usually going to see some type of demonstration in the packaging as well. Okay, so the packaging needs to direct the eye. So we want the eye to first land on the main focal point, and then where does it go? Well, usually once you hit the focal point, your eye is going to jump over to something that's related. Either it's usually the same color as the focal point. If you're not using color to redirect the user's eye or the viewer's eye, then you're going to use other things like leading lines, line of sight, to change the direction of the user's view so they lead through the design. I'm going to try to find something really quickly that I want to show you about that. I think I can Google that one. Hang on, because this is a really good design. It's an advertisement, but there we go. Let's see if we can open this in a window. This particular design is something I use a lot in my lectures, and it's great because it shows how you can manipulate the user's point of view. So even though this is not a package design, it's it's an advertisement, there's still a lot of really interesting techniques that are happening in this particular print ad. So the focal point of the ad is the jack-o'-lantern. Focal points can be circular sometimes. They can literally be like a big circle. Doesn't have to be, of course, but sometimes they can be. And they're going to be the brightest color more than likely. Now, you might say, well, the Budweiser, the can of beer is the focal point. I don't think so. Okay, but I mean, if you had an argument for that, I'm sure you could support it. But from my experience, the focal point is that jack-o'-lantern. But once we look at the jack-o'-lantern, we've got some things happening here. Let's see if I can draw on here and illustrate my point. The jack-o'-lantern's looking at the beer. Okay. Doesn't have any eyeballs, but just the direction, the way the pumpkin is kind of slanted, it's looking towards the beer. Okay. The woman in this ad is very weird as far as her position. I mean, it almost looks like she's coming out of the table, right? Or like she's kneeling behind the table. It's a very bizarre position in the way she has her hand here. It's very strange. But all of these things have a reason. She's also backing up the line of sight to the beer. So if she's looking at the pumpkin, well, if she's looking at the pumpkin, then they're both looking at the beer, right? So boom, they're looking at the beer. Okay, what else is happening here? Well, leading lines can be line of sight, which we're talking about. And they can also just be physical lines that point to something, okay? Oftentimes, leading lines are in triangular shapes. They can be a standard triangle, or they can be an inverted triangle, an upside down triangle, and we look at like the negative part of the cone is the leading line. So talking about triangles, well, if you look at the focal point, if you don't follow the line of sight and look at the beer, you follow the shape of the hat, which points back down at the guy's hand pouring the beer. And if you want to go crazy looking at triangles, well, the whole ad is full of triangles. You've got this old time beer that you have to open with a can opener. We've got the inverted triangle happening right there with the Pilsner glass. You've got triangle here with the cheese, or triangles here. So you say, okay, well, it's just a piece of cheese. Well, if you look at the cheese, and like I said, the triangles point you up, it'll point you up at her face, which points you to her eyes, which maybe points you to the jack-o'-lantern's eyes, which points you back to the beer. But if you look at these shapes, they lead up and they lead back to the beer, right? Everything in this design tends or is meant to send you back towards that beer, okay? Everywhere you look, you are guided by subconscious subliminal cues to look back at the beer, no matter where you go, okay? And that is why I like to show off this design, because it's an excellent example of leading the eye, okay? All right. Scale and hierarchy. This is a good one too. All right. So you have to have some type of visual weight or way to show you what's more important. So there's a few rules of thumb about this. So the easy way to think about this is whatever is the most important is the biggest. And that's usually the product's name, okay? So if we jump over here and look at some examples. Okay. I'm not trying to buy it from Target. I'm just trying to show you the box. Okay. Well, our focal point is pretty easy to see, right? Is Tony the Tiger. He's right there, dead center. How's he directing our eye? Well, he's looking at the cereal, so that's the line of sight. So he's looking right down here. That's our line of sight. He's got the triangle thing happening, right? So he's looking down at the cereal here. So you can see already that some of these leading lines, even the whiskers are kind of pointing in, right? So you can see that in a simple design where you'd say, oh, well, there's nothing going on there. It's just a picture of the tiger. They're still using line of sight and they're still using leading lines, okay? But they're also using some hierarchy now. So visual hierarchy, they're telling us that Tony the Tiger is really important. He's the logo, he's the mascot, I guess, not the logo, but he's the face of the brand. And so they want him to be visual so you don't confuse this with a knockoff of their brand or something that is trying to ride on their coattails. So he's very big, but they're also showing the cereal as well. But the cereal, we're only seeing part of it. So we want to have, they're emphasizing their brand over their product really in this example. But the point is, it's the packaging design, it's the brand, right? So we're buying the tiger. The kids want the tiger, right? Kids don't care so much about the cereal. They care about Tony the Tiger. They like it. Now, the visual hierarchy going on with the text, well, you've got Frosted Flakes, and that's bigger than the company, Kellogg's. So the brand name is bigger. And then, of course, they've got the other text in here, like family size and things like that to break things up. But we really want to think that the bigger the text is, the more important it's supposed to be. Okay, now we can see how this product is tied together with color as well. Tony the Tiger's got a blue nose, there's blue in the background, they're using orange and some of the lettering, right? So that some other design components here. So again, the bigger something is, the more important it is. So a lot of times the company name will be smaller, the product name will be bigger. Things that they don't, you know, a catchphrase or something, it might be a little bit smaller, but we're going to try to get the big selling points larger, right? So we'll see this a little bit more when I'm actually designing with you guys, when we're working on stuff. So I'll elaborate more on this as we go. Okay, so we want to use elements that complement each other. So I'm going to use a phrase that I like to share with students, and it's called, you know, when your elements fight each other or they fight for competition. So if you have two elements that are about the same size, you're not really going to know which one is more important. And that's where we get this idea of them fighting for each other. If you have two things that are both very commanding visually, they're going to fight against each other. So you want to have a dominant element or a dominant image, and then another image that, if you're using more than one image, that complements it or supports it. So that picture I showed you a few minutes ago of Frosted Flakes, the dominant image was Tony the Tiger's face, and the supporting image was the cereal. It wasn't as big, but it still worked together in the design. So these are elements that complement each other, and they don't fight against each other. So the same thing works for text. You can't have all your text huge, because your text has to have something that's the most important, the biggest message, and then other things have to support that message. All right. So too much stuff is going to make your design look really busy. It's going to crowd it, and it's going to be very difficult to work with anything. Okay. So we've got to have things have a good balance in the design. Okay. Clarity and simplicity. So this is important when it comes to packaging design, because how long does somebody really have to interact with the package? So depending on what you're selling, where it is, you might have a little bit longer time than something else, but generally it's just usually a few seconds. Think about it. When you go to the grocery store, you pick up something and look at it, somebody's usually in line trying to get something off the aisle, or or off the rack next to you. If you're just there reading the labels all day, it's gonna be weird, right? People are coming and going, and nobody's gonna spend that much time. You feel rushed when you're at the store. You usually go there, you're trying to get your stuff in, get out, there's a lot of crowds. And so you look at it and you try to make sense of it. If you're trying to get specific information, calories, sugar content, things like that, you'll look for it. But if it's hard to find, it's going to make things frustrating. Okay. Imagine you're trying to find an expiration date on a jug of milk or a bag of cheese or something like that, and you can't see the expiration date. After a couple times of flipping over the package, you're going to get tired of it, and you're going to go with something that you can see, even if it's more expensive, because at least you know the information that you're looking for. You're able to find that before you make your purchase. So that's part of it, all right? So simple designs can be appealing, and you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to make your stuff too busy. When things have too much stuff on them, sometimes it's too difficult to read the packaging. And so you can lose your message by overcomplicating the design. Okay? So don't be afraid to keep things a little bit more simplified and a little bit more direct. Okay, so again, make sure, I think I jumped over. Sorry guys, I went the wrong way. Okay, all right, so rule number 2, honesty. So if I did picking a product 10 times better than it actually is, you're misleading ultimately disappointing the consumer. So yeah, your package shouldn't make false claims. It shouldn't, of course, now with packaging, you've got to have a message that you're trying to sell to. okay? So you want to work with integrity at all times, right? You know, it's better to build a good reputation based on being honest than it is to try to clear up a reputation after somebody thinks you're being shady, right? But we want to think about it like this. There's a promise that you're making, and your promise is associated with your brand, and your packaging is also going to reflect that promise. So if you're going to sell Slim Fast or Nutrisystem or something like that, then you are promising people that they're going to lose weight, and that if they use your product the way it's intended, then you're going to help them achieve their goals of losing weight and getting in shape. And so you have to sell that, otherwise people aren't going to buy it. Okay? Because if you go on a diet and you think, well, if I buy this, it's going to help me lose weight, then I'll get it. But if there's no promise that it's going to do that, then you're probably not going to buy the product, right? So that's where you have to sell an image, you have to sell a message, you have to sell an identity of the brand. But at the same time, you don't want to overplay it and put false claims on things or overdo it. But trust me, you know, when you go and buy a protein shake, or you go to a store like GNC or something, everybody on that packaging is ripped. They're in great shape. You know, you got all these bodybuilders and stuff on there because they're saying, hey, if you buy that, you know, you use my protein powder, you can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, right? And so that's the hype that they're selling. So you want to be honest, but, you know, this is an area where a lot of times you're selling a dream with the packaging, and you should think about that. Sorry, I went back again, okay? So authenticity, all right? The only way to set your brand apart is to be different, to be authentic. Now, this is something that's really important. So when you create your designs, you want to have some originality in the design. You're going to be able to find knockoffs of everything. Just in a regular store, go to Walmart, go wherever, you're going to find one product, and then you'll find another product that does the same thing, has the same promise, and has similar packaging. And that's because they're trying to steal some of the market of a bigger competitor of a larger brand. But if you really want to set yourself apart, you're going to have an original package design. And the originality of that design can draw consumers to you because it's fun, it's different, it's cool. And so if you have an authentic design in the package, it's only going to help you. Don't look to somebody else's design and try to copy that. Create your own and have your own original vision for your product design, and it's going to take you a long way. Sorry, I did the same thing. Okay. And we also want to think of something called shelf impact. So shelf impact is really important because this is what gets people to notice you against other competitors. So if you ever watch the TV show Shark Tank, you'll see a lot of this stuff when they come on and they're trying to sell products where they talk to them about packaging and how it looks on the shelf, because it's very important. If you have something that can get people's attention and look interesting and get them to pick up the product, there's a good chance that they'll buy it. Of course, price has a factor and all that stuff, and you know that's definitely a big consideration. But just by getting someone to stop and notice the packaging, and this can be done with color, it can be done with imagery, it can be done with fonts even. But those are your three big ways of doing this. But by getting somebody to stop and take note and say, hey, you know, what's going on here? That looks really cool. Let me see what's happening. I want to get that package. I want to interact with it. I want to pick it up and look at it. And if they pick it up and they look at it and it's a product that interests them, then they just might buy it. And if that happens, then your package design is successful. Okay. All right, so it is 6:50 p.m. Mountain Time right now. And I'm going to take a brief break and come back, and I'm going to demo what a die line. I'm going to show you what a die line is, and I'm going to demo the product or this week's assignment. So I'm going to mute my mic, and I will come back in 10 minutes. So if you're watching the recording, just go ahead and zoom forward 10 minutes, and I'll reconvene at that time. All right, guys. So let me just make sure my mic is on. All right, my mic is on. Okay, so that covers the slides, but we didn't really get into what a die line is. So let me show you what a die line is. A die line is basically a template for your package. And so I've got a bunch of examples here I Googled just to show you. And the assignment itself is going to get into how to use a die line. And we'll work with that. I'm going to show you how to get it set up. But basically, it's going to be all the flaps and all the areas that you are going to have to print as part of your package. And the reason you have this set up as a die line, and I've got this one here, so let me just open it in a new tab, and then I can expand it a little bit. Kind of hard to see. Okay, but basically, this is going to be the document that we print. So we're setting it up. We're going to set up a rough one tonight. And I don't have any sketches or anything available. So I'm really just going to set up the measurements and colorize my logo and pop that in there and do some things like that. But you're actually going to put in rough sketches that you're working on right now. So you can't get around doing the rough sketches and pretending that you did them, because you got to do them to put them in as far as your package layout. But basically, it's got to have all the flaps, all the folds. So these die lines can be set up in all kinds of different ways, okay? Because there's all types of different packaging. So they can be set up to fold in a box, like this example. Sometimes it's a flat packaging that has a little attachment. So if any of you guys out there remember playing with action figures, or you have kids, like with me, I grew up playing G.I. Joe and Star Wars. And so I'm very familiar with those types of toy packaging, or even like Hot Wheels cars, where it's a flat cardboard back that has a bunch of artwork on it, and then there's a little plastic part, like a window, a compartment glued on top of the package where the actual toy is contained, so you can see it. But again, those die lines, there's just a million different ways you can come up with the way your stuff's printed. So they can be different in all kinds of ways, all right? So we'll look at getting one set up. So just to go over the actual assignment, open it up right now. I'm not going to read the whole background of the assignment. You guys, if you haven't done so, you should do so already. But what I'm going to do is grab my specifications, which I've already got. Let's make sure I downloaded those. So okay, so there they are. So if I open them up, I've got this die line for my specifications. And this is going to tell me basically what the measurements need to be, okay, in inches. And so setting this up is not going to be overly complicated because it's already labeled for me, okay? So I'm basically just showing how the measurements are going to be set up, okay? So I've got that. And so part one of this assignment, we're going to have two parts, okay? So part one is really what I'm going to get going with you guys. And part two, I can add color to my logo, which I'll do with you guys tonight. and that'll kind of get you where you need to go. Okay. All right. So you can do this in Illustrator. You can do this in InDesign. It doesn't matter, whatever you're more comfortable with. Now, honestly, if I was going to take this and get this all set up for print, I'd probably be using InDesign, but you can use either one. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I've got some information here. So I'm going to make the artboard large enough to support the die line. And I'm going to, so that's telling me an artboard right now. It's already telling me I'm going to work in Illustrator. And I'm going to use a layer and label it die line. And the second layer that I'm going to call artwork. Position the artwork in the appropriate layer configuration so I can write on top of it. Okay. And die line is a closed vector path. Cut lines. Let's see, 0.5 stroke weight. Full line. Okay. All right. So okay. So we're going to have a couple things. We're going to have dashed lines that show folds. And let's see. I'm just looking this over to see if it wants me to retrace the entire thing. And it looks like it does want me to. Stroke weight. Okay, so let's get this thing set up. Let's close this. File new. I'll start off with 11 by 14. If I need to change that, I will. Let me see how I'm supposed to name this thing. DES244. Assignment 2. Is it first name, last name? First, last. So. Okay. Create. Okay. And then I am going to do a file. And what I want to choose here is choose place. And then I'm going to locate my die line here. I'm going to hit place, drop it in here. Okay. And it looks like I'm going to need to do a little editing. Okay. So I've got to change my artboard around because my artboard's too small. So I've got my artboard right here. It looks like it's a little small, so I'm going to click on the artboard itself. And I'm going to choose Edit Artboard. And for my width, let's see if I go to 12 inches, if that's enough. No, let's go to 14. There we go. Okay, so I just selected my artboard and I changed my width on it so I could see what I was doing. Let's go to my layers. And I think it wants me just to name an artboard for my layer. It wants me to call it die line. Okay, so over here, I'm going to double click on my layer. I'm going to call this die line. And at that point, you should probably save it. So I'm going to do a file, save as, and I'll just put it on my desktop. for now. Okay, so I don't lose my work to this point. Okay, and so it wants me to have a bleed set up too, so I didn't set that up in my initial document. So file, document setup. Okay, here's my bleed right here. So to get to that, I just went to File, choose Document Setup, and I've got to see what the bleed measurement is, 0.125. So for your bleed, I'm going to hit 0.125, and if this chain link is on, it'll set it all the way around, which is what you want, and hit OK. And so now you got this little red box around here, and that shows you that you've got that offset area. So if anything goes beyond your page for a full bleed, it won't get clipped when it gets printed. That's the point of a bleed. So I'll do a file save at that point. And you could also set that bleed up when you're opening a document as well. I just forgot to do it. Okay, so cut lines, it wants to have a 0.5 stroke weight. Fold lines, 0.5 stroke weight with dash of 4 point. Okay, so cut lines are going to be in bleed area. So I believe what it wants us to do at this point is to redraw this thing. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is make another layer here. Okay, and I'm going to call it artwork. Actually, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make a new layer because I kind of messed up. This one, I'm going to just call this source. Okay. And over here, this is going to be my die line because we want to redo the die line here, redraw it. And so what it's telling me right now is that my cut lines are going to have a 0.5 stroke. Okay, and the fold lines are going to have a 0.5 stroke with a weight. So the fold lines are the dashed lines, right? And the cut lines are the ones that are not going to fold. So basically, it doesn't matter if this is a little small. What matters is that we're working on the right layers, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come in, I'm going to get my pen tool. You use the line tool if you want, but the pen's going to be easier to work with. And I'm going to use my properties, and I want to have a 0.5 stroke right there. And we'll turn the fill off. We don't need any fill here. Okay. All right, and so what we're going to do is trace these lines. Actually, I should be a little bit more thought out about it. So I'm going to do it like this, so I can do this in the least amount of paths. So you really want to plan how you're entering the work so you don't have to do a whole bunch of extra selecting and deselecting to, I'm a little bit off right there. So this isn't perfect. I'm going to do it a little bit rough, but I just want you to get an idea where to go with this, okay? Because it took me a second to read the directions because I kind of thought I just needed to place that in there, but you got to do a little bit more than that. Okay, and then come down here like so. Okay, at this point, you need to select a different tool, okay? Because that's going to let you deselect all those lines, okay? And so what we need to do now is adjust for these different settings. So now we've got to have 0.5 stroke with a 4-point line and a 2-point gap space. So I'll select my line tool and let's see, it's asking me a 0.5 stroke. And there we are. Sorry guys, I was looking around for things right in front of your face. So I was trying to find where I could edit the stroke, and you just have to click on stroke. Okay. So I'm going to select dashed lines, and then let's go back and look at the measurements. A dash of 4 points with a 2-point gap space. Okay, so go back here. And I want to select dash line, and it says 4-point. And then the gap, I'm going to make that 2-point. So again, I got that by just clicking the stroke. So now, get my line tool, and I can draw these lines across. If you need them to be perfectly straight, hold down the shift key. Sorry. Hold down the shift key, and you can make your line across. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to hold down shift key here. Let's see. Make sure I'm starting at the right point. Hold down my shift key, go all the way up. There we go. Hold down my shift key, go all the way up. There we go. Hold down my shift key, go all the way up. There we go. Shift key, go all the way up. There we go. And over here, I'll get this, and I'll go all the way across. Okay. So now, if I go back to my layers, and I shut off my source layer, there you go. I can see that I've already got that set up. So most of my die line's already done. What I want to do is come in, and I'm going to have to add measurements and things like that. So what you would do at this point is you would keep the, you don't have to keep the letters, you're going to come in and actually put the measurements by it. So I would come over here and it says A, front sides, back panel. Okay, so that's 2 inches by 7.5. Okay, so that would be right here. So you can really do this in another layer even. I probably would use another layer so I didn't mess up my lines. It's telling you not to, just to have those layers, but honestly, I'd be a little concerned that I'd screw up my lines. So what I would do here is just make one layer above that, and then I would come in and put my measurements. So you can do this maybe with a red line or something. And maybe do 2.2 inches by, do it like this. Okay, and then I could put the measurement for that. It's a little bit off, but I can just make the measurement change for that. So over here, I could just put 7.5 inches. IN. Probably bold that up a little bit. Make it the same color. Put that there. Okay. All right, so you guys see where I'm going with this. So if we turn that off, we're starting to see the way it's set up with the measurements. So I'm gonna follow along and do the same thing, right? So we would do the rest of those measurements if we go back and turn the source image on. So 2 inches, so it'd be 2 inches across like that. So then we'll just do that 2 inches. So that's front, side, and back panel. So then what I would do here is just, again, kind of expand out like this. Put down my shift key to straighten that up. And then I would do, you know, something really similar here. Probably just copy this text. Hold on Alt. Just drag it. And then change that so it's the same measurement, so that would be 2 inches. Okay. Right. And so on. All right. So you can just get the rest of the stuff labeled, right? So you're expanding the measurements and you're creating this die line setup. Okay. So let's see. That's actually a little bit confusing where I put it because that looks like it's E, the glue flap. So I probably would put that there actually. I'd put it on the other side. And you just got to work through this and use a little common sense as you're going. But you can do it over here. It doesn't really matter if I cover that thing because, again, I would be shutting that die line off, the source image off. I guess I put it on the wrong layer. But you see where I'm going, right? So I can essentially just do it like this. Expand it out here. Expand it out here. So we show the measurements of the boxes. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do, just get it all set up. And the reason I moved it to the other side was because we had that glue flap thing and that if I show the source again, that glue flap was kind of right here. That had a different measurement. And so that was kind of confusing in the layout. So you're gonna line the whole thing up. So all these measurements, and they're going to be different depending on which package design you've chosen, are all coordinating to these specifics, okay? And then when I see it, I can just turn that source image off and just see your die line all set up, okay? Which is what I want. So like that with all the appropriate measurements on it. So that's the first step. And once you have this set up, you don't need, like I said, this is not fully complete, but I want to show you a couple more things that we're starting to get down to the end of the course here, the last half an hour. So once this is set up, we can make it bigger, okay? So we don't have to just have it small down there in the corner. We want to utilize the space so we can expand it, okay? And you can see what you're doing a little bit. So have your measurements kind of knocked out to the very edge. And at this point, we can start planning how we're actually going to design stuff. Okay, so you should have your sketches already now. So we're looking at this thing as kind of a wraparound type of label here, okay? And so one of these areas is going to be the front, one is going to be the back. So I'm assuming that this area here is probably going to be the middle of my design. This is going to wrap around a bottle of hot sauce. Okay? I could be wrong, but that's my assumption. So at this point, you should be bringing in your rough sketches and trying to fill them in and look for whatever space that you go. So I'm going to open up something that I downloaded previously. And I've got some information here that I can already put on my design, right? So I've got that. So I'm going to do a file place. And I'm going to go to my branding info and I'm going to place this. And so let's place it and I'm going to put it down here, bottom corner. And I'm going to get my logo, place this guy. I'm going to put in right around here, center of this design. All right, now I can resize it, which I think I'm going to. And let's look at the text that I have for this. So let's go back over here. At this point, you're not blocking in the text. You're just putting in your sketches and the logo, okay? So don't assume that you got to put the text in at this point, but we will have to put in some text. And so I'm looking at it because I want to get an idea of how much space I'm going to need to save open. So if I make that wild bill really big, then it's going to be a little bit hard for me to put other stuff that I need to have. I'm going to have a barcode on here, and there's a link for a barcode generator. I'm going to have to put the ingredients, that's mandatory. I'm going to have to put the flavor. I'm going to have to put net weight and where it's manufactured. So I have some things that I need to put in here, plus all this stuff. Spicy is good, but it's not enough. So I've got a lot of information I need to place in this design. And so if I just go with this giant wild bill here, it's not going to leave me any room. And so that gave me an idea that I'm going to have to do a little bit less with this guy. Okay. So shrink him down a little bit. Not too much, can't make him too small, but I'm going to make him smaller. Now, you guys need to be putting in your sketches in here too, not just your logo. So this is not a finished product once you've colored your logo and set it up. You have to have sketches. If you don't have your rough sketches blocked in, it's going to affect your grade quite a bit. So make sure that you have that done. But we want to add some color. So I'm going to open my libraries. And I've got my Wild West themes. And so I think I'm going to go with this theme, this Red Dead theme that I did this last week. And so I'm going to select some things, but it's not quite everything I need because he's got some pistols on him and stuff. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use the entire thing as planned, but we'll see what we can do. Okay. So all right, so what I did is I chose edit original, if you can see what I did right now, because I'm going to change the colors. So I had it selected there and I just hit edit original and that pops open the original. And the reason I want to do this is because I want to change the color of the design. And if I was going to do it the other way, I'd have to take some different steps to do it. So looking back at my libraries, I have some colors that I picked out. So I want to add some color to this guy, right? And some things, I'm not going to change his hair color, of course, but like maybe the band on his hat, I'd be able to do something with that. Maybe give him a red hat band, not like that. Just having all kinds of trouble tonight. Okay, let's see. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to expand it. Hopefully that's going to break it apart so I can select different pieces. Yeah, I'm just having all kinds of trouble getting that selected. It's not letting me pull that out. I'm going to try something a little bit more simple then. And I'll try just applying some changes to the lettering. I guess everything's all grouped together, and that's why I'm having some trouble with it. Okay, but I'm coming down here and I'm changing around a few things because I'm not having the ability to get everything changed I want without going in and coloring this up with the paintbrush and stuff, which I think is a little bit unnecessary because I really should be able to just grab these selections and color them, but it's not letting me get them independently. Yeah, weird. Kind of like that orange on it. But like I said, I didn't want to get the whole thing and color them up like that. So, can go back and just try this another way. So there's certain things that I'm going to be able to do on here to recolor it simply, and a lot of this stuff is grouped as one shape. And so I was trying to expand it and break it apart, see if I could do some different options to color it, but without taking a whole lot of time, it's not really going to work with me. So what I'm doing is I'm just going through and making a couple of modifications that I can do without getting this whole thing and having to go in with a paintbrush or something, because this is all one object. And so what I was trying to do is expand it, because I was hoping I could break these things apart into different shapes, and then I could come in and just grab the little pieces here individually. But every time I try to grab an individual piece, even if it looks like it's highlighted individually, it's not letting me do anything with it that doesn't select the whole thing. So let's go to select, let's see. Let's inverse the selection, see what happens. Certainly not, right? So select, let's inverse that again. All right, so yeah, it's not gonna really work unless I go in and physically paint it, which is really self-defeating, because with Illustrator you should be able to grab it and just select things and change the colors. So that doesn't make any sense to have to go in and paint it out in little pieces like that, and your end result is going to look really rough. So maybe no, I'm going to make my life harder like that. So basically you want to recolor what you can, okay, and change it. So I'm going to leave it with this, and I apologize about that. I didn't expect that that would give me a big problem. I thought that I would just have an easy go at that, and so that really is kind of a surprise to me that I ended up with a big mess like that. Okay, so let's do that. Just keep that at black. Okay, and we'll save. I'll save it. So what I'm going to do now is just update the import. So I just went to Window, and I chose Links. And you see it's giving me a little warning sign. I just hit yes like that, and that updates the new version of the information. So that was really a big waste of time, so I apologize about that. But usually when these things come in, we can break them apart and we can just go around and grab them and highlight these sections and color it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing something tonight. Like I said, I'm feeling the weather, so I'm not firing on all cylinders. So anyways, I got this blocked in, and that's pretty much what you're going to do. Is you're going to bring this in, colorize it. So we want to see some changes to the color, and I want you to go in and add your rough sketches in here for your layout. Okay? You don't have to worry about any of this other stuff except for maybe the nutritional facts, and the rest of the things we will develop as we go. Okay, so this is about blocking out your rough stuff. So get the die line in, get this part in, and that's pretty much going to satisfy what we need to get done. So that's pretty much all I have for tonight. Like I said, I didn't expect to have any issues with coloring that guy in. That's kind of bothering me that I was having so much trouble. But anyways, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. That's pretty much most of what I have for tonight, and that should get you started on getting your assignment done. Your discussion board's really easy, and your assessment is going to be a graded quiz. So if you follow these steps, colorize your stuff, hopefully you have better luck than I was having tonight. It's going to be a big problem, but anyways, go ahead and get that stuff done, and you should be in good shape. You can email me if you have any questions. Friday, I am going to be unavailable on Friday. So if you need to ask me a question, try to get a hold of me either on sometime Thursday, tomorrow will be your best bet, and I'll try to respond to you quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to save my work there in case I have to pick up on this. And that's going to drive me crazy until I figure out what I was doing wrong. But anyways, let's get this turned in, right? You got two parts to the assignment. Make sure you do both of them. And then your discussion board's easy. We already talked about that. Announcements, let's go back, sorry, home. All right, so your discussion board's pretty self-explanatory, and your assessment's going to be a graded quiz. So just go ahead and take care of both of those, all three of those things. We should be good. You guys are supposed to do a introduction discussion post and tell me who you are. Nobody's done that, so I'd appreciate it if you did that, and I'm really hoping to see some more participation in the class, guys. So anyways, I guess I want to wrap it up there. So have a good evening or a good day, and we'll talk to you guys soon.